Hare Krishna, we continue with chapter 1 of Bhagavad-gita as it is, observing the armies on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. As the opposing armies stand poised for battle, Arjuna, the mighty warrior, sees his intimate relatives, teachers and friends in both armies, ready to fight and sacrifice their lives. Overcome by grief and pity, Arjuna fails in strength, his mind becomes bewildered, and he gives up his determination to fight. He also lists several reasons why he shouldn't fight this war. Bhagavad-gita, as most Vedic scriptures, opens with a question. This signifies that knowledge is transmitted through the process of inquiry. This is important because it means that in order to receive knowledge, you have to approach a teacher. Of course, you can always learn something about something by reading a book or watching a video on YouTube, as you're doing now. In order to master a subject thoroughly, however, you have to find a real living teacher who can implement the knowledge, the skills that go with it, and most importantly, the character and values that are necessary for its proper assimilation and application. Why acquiring the proper character is so crucial? It is because knowledge is ultimately meant to serve others, and serving others is not possible without good qualities. So, back to the question. Dhritarashtra, the blind king of the Kurus, asked his secretary Sanjaya, "After my sons and the sons of Pandava assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do?" This question seems a little strange. The warriors have gathered with a desire to fight. What is the point then of asking, what did they do? There is a point though. The battlefield was on a holy place, and holy places are special because they purify the mind and make us better persons. All well and good, but the king was not very happy about it. It was precisely that pious influence of the Kurukshetra which made him uneasy. His concern was twofold. Dhritarashtra hoped that the pious influence of the holy place of pilgrimage will not discourage his demoniac sons to fight, and also will not give additional strength to the righteous Pandavas. Dhritarashtra's hypocrisy is evident also by the word mamaka, mine, which shows that he is partial to his sons and envious to the sons of his brother, the Pandavas. This word is also important because it reveals the very reason for the war, and indeed for any type of violence. It is the concept of mine and yours, friends and enemies. This materialistic idea creates hatred and envy, which lead to conflicts. After examining the Pandavas' army, Duryodhana became afraid. Duryodhana is one of Dhritarashtra's sons, the king. So he became afraid because although he knew that his army is bigger, he also knew that Pandava's warriors are superior in quality. The great heroes of the Kauravas' army, of Duryodhana's army, Bhishma and Drona, had great attachment for the Pandavas and sided with Duryodhana because of political considerations only. Thus, they were not wholeheartedly dedicated to the Duryodhana's cause. On the other hand, the generals from the Pandavas' army were united and completely committed. Because of his fear at the sight of the opposing army, King Duryodhana personally approached his guru, Drona, instead of summoning him as befits a king. But Duryodhana attempted to hide his fear, pretending that he comes only out of respect for his guru. With his carefully selected words, Duryodhana wanted to provoke Drona. By the usage of the word Panduputranam, the sons of Pandu, he pointed out that the Pandavas are Drona's disciples, and yet they are ready to fight and kill him. Duryodhana hoped that this audacity will invoke the anger of Drona, and he will fight with full strength. The Pandavas' army is called great, although it is much smaller than the Kauravas. Duryodhana uses this word because he does not want Drona to be lenient in the battle. This also shows that envious persons like Duryodhana cannot tolerate even the smallest progress of his enemy. One of the leading heroes of the Pandava's army. Drishtadyumna is called Drupada Putrena, the son of Drupada, which is a further prod for Drona. Since Drona and Drupada, Drishtadyumna's father, were enemies. In the past, Drona had some political quarrel with King Drupada, the father of Draupadi and Drishtadyumna, who was Arjuna's wife, Draupadi. As a result of this quarrel, Drupada performed a great sacrifice by which he received the benediction of having a son who would be able to kill Dronacharya. Dronacharya knew this perfectly well, and yet, as a liberal Brahmana, he did not hesitate to impart all his military secrets when the son of Drupada, Drishtadyumna, was entrusted to him for military education. This shows the great qualities of Brahmana. Duryodhana indirectly reprimanded his guru, Drona, by using the words Tava Shishyana Dhimata, your intelligent disciple, Drishtadyumna. Duryodhana suggests that Drona was deceived by Drishtadyumna, who will now use all he had learned against his own teacher. Thus Duryodhana's opinion is that one should perform his duty only as long as this is favorable for his opulence and sense enjoyment. To go against one's selfish interests in the name of dharma or duty is simply foolishness. Thinking that Drona might perceive his fear from the Pandava's army, then Duryodhana boasted the power of his own soldiers. To further encourage Drona, Duryodhana next named Drona's father-in-law Kripa and Drona's son Ashvatthama as great warriors. The next was Vikarna, who was not a great warrior like Drona or Bhishma and Karna, but as he was the only one who objected when at the gambling match Draupadi was insulted, Duryodhana was worried that he might join the Pandavas. By listing his name among the best of the Kshatriyas, Duryodhana wanted to flatter Vikarna and thus secure his loyalty. The word Tyaktva Jivita is used in the sense that the soldiers are ready to sacrifice their lives for Duryodhana's sake. That's what Duryodhana says. However, the literal meaning is those who have given up their lives. Thus Duryodhana admitted that he wanted to achieve his selfish goals even at the cost of the lives of his own men. Duryodhana's mood is typical for the demons, asuras. They want to enjoy a life of sense gratification even at the cost of others' happiness. It is interesting that both Duryodhana and Arjuna observed the armies before the battle, but their reactions were opposite. Duryodhana was happy to see that many noble Kshatriyas are ready to die for his cause. As a pious man, on the other hand, Arjuna felt compassion for both enemies and friends. Arjuna fought only after Krishna personally guaranteed that this is the best thing for him to do. Duryodhana, on the other hand, was resolved to fight, even though Bhishma, Drona, Vidura, and Krishna repeatedly attempted to persuade him out of his plans. Then Bhishma, the grandsire of the Kuru dynasty, could understand the inner meaning of the heart of his grandson Duryodhana, and out of his natural compassion for him, he tried to cheer him by blowing his conchs very loudly. But indirectly, by the symbolism of the conch, which is one of the symbols of Krishna, he informed his insecure grandson that he had no chance of victory in the battle, because the Supreme Lord Krishna was on the other side. But still, it was his duty to conduct the fight, and he'll do his best. When Lord Krishna and Arjuna blew their divine conchs in response, the sound shattered the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra. Arjuna had Hanuman on his flank, a chariot given by Agni, and above all, Lord Krishna, who is the master of the senses and the husband of the goddess of fortune, was personally present to guide him. All these were the signs of assured victory for the Pandavas. Then Arjuna said, "O infallible one, please draw my chariot between the two armies, so that I may see those present here who desire to fight, and with whom I must contend in this great trial of arms. Arjuna is speaking to his friend Krishna, who is his charioteer. It so happened that besides being Arjuna's charioteer, Krishna is also the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How it is possible that God can take such a subordinate position? Although he had accepted the position of a charioteer for his devotee, his supreme position was not challenged. In all circumstances, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hrishikesha, the Lord of the total senses, Achyuta. The relationship between the Lord and his servitor is very sweet and transcendental. The servitor is always ready to render service to the Lord, and similarly, the Lord is always seeking an opportunity to render some service to the devotee. Actually, Krishna takes greater pleasure when his pure devotee assumes the advantageous position of ordering him than he does in being the giver of the orders. When he finds that the pure devotee is ordering him, he obtains transcendental pleasure, although he is the infallible master in all circumstances. Arjuna did not rush blindly into the fight. He first wanted to see the enemies and to estimate their strength. In the same way, in the very beginning of his spiritual quest, the spiritual warrior should be able to recognize the real enemies of the soul, and they are lust, anger, and greed. And he should know how to defeat them. Krishna obeyed the order of Arjuna and drove the chariot amidst the two armies. It is significant that Krishna positioned the chariot just in front of Bhishma and Drona, Arjuna's grandfather and guru, the persons who loved him dearly and the persons for whom Arjuna had the strongest affection. Thus Arjuna was confronted with his most powerful material attachments. To those who sincerely want to embark on the spiritual quest, the Lord mercifully reveals their weaknesses, the material attachments, and also the method for overcoming them. Then it is up to the spiritual seeker to take advantage and to develop his dormant God consciousness. So in order to please God, Krishna, Arjuna had to give up his attachment for all who are on the wrong side on the battlefield. This test comes in the life of everyone. A person who wants to advance spiritually will have to give up his selfish desires. If he decides to keep them and to run away from the battle, following the path of the least resistance, his progress on the spiritual path will be checked. He will be in the position of a person who wants to possess a precious gem but doesn't want to pay the price for it. What is the price one should be prepared to pay in order to become spiritually advanced? One should have faith that simply by pleasing the Lord, he will attain all perfection in life. He should be convinced that the Lord will always protect the surrendered souls. In other words, he should be ready to move on from his excessive material attachments, which impede his natural longing for freedom, for love, for Godhead. So Arjuna requests Krishna to drive the chariot between the two armies because he wants to see the enemies who have come to fight on the side of the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra. Upon seeing them face to face, however, Arjuna shifts his perspective and takes them to be his relatives instead. Thus he feels compassion and lists several reasons why he should not be asked to fight against them. So now we will list Arjuna's reasons not to fight. The first one has been already mentioned. It is compassion. What could be more noble than that? What could be more magnanimous? Just imagine, the huge armies are ready for battle. The general, upon seeing the soldiers of the enemy ready to fight and die, unexpectedly develops compassion, both for them and for his own men, and decides on the spot to leave the battlefield and to become a saintly mendicant. That decision, many would claim, is the perfection of spirituality. Additionally, imagine what a great storyline that would make. Why then Lord Krishna rejected such a honorable notion? What kind of God will urge his devotee to fight in a fratricidal war, killing their own family members? over dispute for a land. We will answer these questions at length a little later. For now, let us try to understand a simple point. Virtues don't exist unless they are connected to God. All good qualities are property of God, and He bestows them on those who serve Him with love and devotion. The appearances of the so-called good qualities in persons who reject spiritual life are only shadow of virtues. They appear and disappear in due course of time, just like the winter and the summer seasons, according to the karma of the person. In other words, such people don't own actually their so-called good qualities. They only temporarily manifest them. They are simply rewarded the good and bad results of their karma. Another question is what the definition of virtue is and who establishes it. The meaning of virtue is and its practical application in human society have changed many times over the years. Many people even think that it is impossible to have a universal definition of anything, virtue including. This relativism has spread its influence everywhere. Therefore, a materialist will become upset that Krishna encouraged killing one's own relatives and will praise Arjuna as a non-violent, saintly person. However, since an absolute definition of virtue does exist, this view is wrong. Arjuna was motivated by the very source of violence, family attachment. When one is bound by family attachment, he is forced to think in terms of I and mine. This leads to strife between persons, families, social groups, and nations. Therefore, since Arjuna's so-called compassion was without real connection with the desire of the Lord, it was improper. It turns out it was actually a cowardice in the face of the real enemy, the family attachments. If Arjuna was to fight with soldiers unrelated to his family, he would kill them without hesitation, as he had done on numerous occasions before. But because he was attached to his kinsmen, he wanted to avoid the battle, pretending to be a non-violent saint. Arjuna's desire to retire and become a mendicant was thus emerging from frustration, because one cannot attain material happiness if he kills all loved and dear ones, and not from genuine spiritual realization. Consequently, Krishna rejected it. To Arjuna's credit, we should mention that God himself created his illusion. His compassion, misplaced as it was also a general sign of a kind-hearted person, and as such it deserves certain appreciation. However, his attempt to hide his unwillingness to perform his duty behind the cloak of compassion for his relatives and gurus was unacceptable for a noble kshatriya, and thus was condemned, even from a mundane point of view. Confronted with his material attachments, Arjuna became depressed. Depression is unavoidable as long as we have material desires. It comes from fear of losing our material possessions. It is a fear that we all have deep inside us. Arjuna was not a coward. He was a competent warrior, but still, the bodily concept of life is so strong that he admits, "My dear Krishna, I have to kill my own men." By own men, Arjuna means those connected to his material body. Why are the others not my own men? Since everyone is a son of God, everyone is supposed to be own man. Such vision is possible, however, only for those who are God conscious. When one is lacking such divine consciousness, he sees all men only where there is a bodily relationship. Thus he becomes absorbed in material dualities like friend and enemy, good and evil, etc. Although compassion for relatives and friends on the opposite side of the battlefield was ultimately materialistic, it would still invoke in the reader sympathy and understanding. The second of Arjuna's reasons not to fight is less likely to do so, and this reason was desire for enjoyment. Arjuna says, "O Govinda, of what avail to us are kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed on this battlefield?" After pleading that compassion for his relatives is the main reason for his unwillingness to fight. Now Arjuna points out a more practical reason. You cannot enjoy life by killing all the people you want to share your enjoyment with. Arjuna has addressed Lord Krishna as Govinda because Krishna is the object of all pleasures for the house and the senses. By using this significant word, Arjuna indicates that Krishna should understand what will satisfy Arjuna's senses. This shows a major misunderstanding because God, Govinda or Krishna, he is not meant for satisfying our senses. If we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda, however, then automatically our own senses are satisfied. Materially, everyone wants to satisfy his senses, and he wants God to be the order supplier for such satisfaction. This is the improper religion of our day and age. The Lord will satisfy the senses of the living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet. But when one takes the opposite way, namely, when one tries to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desires of the living entities are satisfied. Arjuna refused to fight because his motivation was selfish. He wanted to win the kingdom and to enjoy it together with his relatives. As soon as he realized that he can only be victorious at the expense of his family members, he became desperate. He understood that his plans for family happiness were doomed, and he declined to fight. In other words, Arjuna thinks that by killing his kinsmen, there will be no happiness in his life, and therefore he is not willing to fight, just as a person. Arjuna calculated that even if he wins the kingdom, he will not be able to enjoy it without his relatives. This is a typical calculation of materialistic life. Arjuna played the role of a conditioned soul, and the conditioned soul identifies with the sum total of attachments comprising of his own body, the bodies of his relatives and friends, and all their material possessions. And the result of such false identification is that whenever a relative dies, the conditioned soul feels like a part of his own personality is destroyed. Arjuna's situation was severe because he was about to lose not just one, but all his family members at once. In fact, he had to personally kill them all. And this extreme circumstance resulted in severe identity crisis. Arjuna thought that killing his kinsmen is as good as committing suicide. A materialist's identity is threatened not only by losing his friends, but by losing his enemies as well. Both friendly and inimical behavior nourishes the false ego, by entrapping one more and more in the illusory dualities of material existence, good and bad, friend and enemy. Many great material accomplishments are achieved because of the impetus generated by the enemy's side. Thus, friends and enemies are essential for a materialistic person because both are used to solidify the bodily concept of life and to enhance sense gratification. The intense desire for material sense gratification is always tainted by the fear that the obstacles for securing such sense gratification will be unsurmountable. And thus, the next reason for Arjuna's decline to fight is fear of sinful reactions. Arjuna was fearful of sinful reactions as a result of killing his own relatives in his pursuance of material happiness. Krishna, however, answered that killing an aggressor is not a sin. The Kauravas were aggressors, and to kill such aggressors is not a sin. Arjuna, however, argued that the above injunction of the Shastra originates in the Arthashastra, the scripture that gives the method for pious acquisition of wealth. According to the higher Dharma Shastra, however, one should be ready to forgive even such aggressors. Thus Arjuna failed to understand that since God himself is the origin of all Shastric injunctions, and since all such injunctions are meant ultimately to satisfy him, as Krishna explains in Gita, Vedaischa sarvar aham eva vedyo vedanta krit veda vid eva chaham. God's single word is the essence of all dharmic rules and regulations. Arjuna failed to understand this. Thus Arjuna tried to cover up his weakness with lofty arguments. This is an example of improper use of the intelligence. Intelligence is meant to help one to advance in spiritual life. The materialist, however, generally uses his intelligence to rationalize his material attachments. The best way to do this is by deconstructing the traditional values and thus relativizing everything. The result is that there is existential uncertainty in all spheres of life, and since nobody really knows what is going on and what is ought to be done, then what is the solution? One may as well have a good time and enjoy while he can. Arjuna, following his conscience, declared that the Pandavas are greedy just as the Kauravas are. Although for the common person it is beneficial to follow his conscience, for Arjuna it was a step back because the supreme authority, Lord Krishna, was personally present to guide him. Deluded by family attachment, Arjuna mistook the righteous act of fighting for religious principles as an act of greed. This shows another defect of the conditioned soul. One of the main ways in which his primordial envy of God manifests is by his futile attempts to recreate the reality according to his whims. Although he suffers intensely in the grip of the material energy, he seriously thinks that he is the controller, the enjoyer, and the best friend of all living beings. A symptom of such false identity is Arjuna's declaration that he is ready to die unarmed on the battlefield, just because he wanted to keep intact his false identity of a good and moral person. He wanted his name to stay in the history as the hero who sacrificed his life for the sake of others. His fruitive mentality is captured in the words, "Better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, were to kill me unarmed." This shows that the conditioned soul creates a false image of himself and is ready to defend it even at the cost of his life. This false identity of being the controller and enjoyer, and above all, of being the best friend of all living entities, is behind the last reason for Arjuna's unwillingness to perform his duty. And this last reason is destruction of family tradition. Arjuna's argument is as follows. If we kill all these warriors, who will later train and protect their children and women? Lack of proper training will create havoc in the society. When the family leaders are dead, the family becomes involved in irreligion. Women lose their chastity and mix unrestrictedly with all types of unscrupulous men on the plea of equality and freedom. The result is, as we see in our contemporary society, lots of unprotected and unhappy women who give birth to unwanted progeny, or Varna Shankara. When Varna Shankara floods the world, the performance of Vedic ritual stops, the forefathers are degraded, and all kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated. This is a quite accurate description of our day and age. So why Varna Shankara is such a bad thing? Varna Shankara, or mixed population, is dangerous because it lacks material and spiritual identity. Society can be peaceful and prosperous only when its members are well acquainted with their duties. Persons who do not identify with particular Varna and Ashrama do not follow any set of duty and are thus unpredictable in their behavior. They, in other words, follow only their whims. They just follow their mind and senses, and they act accordingly. This is bad for the society, this is bad for them also. The science of self-realization starts from resolving one's material nature. Taking a clear stand in terms of Varna and Ashrama, therefore, is conducive for the spiritual advancement. Since Arjuna was influenced by false ego, all of his apparently good arguments were actually tainted by selfishness. So, now we're going back to Arjuna's argument. He wanted to leave the battlefield because of family attachment. This was his reason. And this is the biggest disgrace for a Kshatriya. Still, Arjuna tried to rationalize his cowardice, deceiving himself that his reluctance to fight was caused by compassion, wisdom, and detachment. He did not have the courage to face his actual motives because his self-esteem will be destroyed. Arjuna tried to avoid his social obligations as a warrior by pleading so-called higher moral principles. In this way, he wanted to establish moral principles over social obligations. But since the Lord himself was resolved for the fight, all those apparently important considerations were without substance. This is because reasoning and emotions have meaning only when they are connected with the Lord. Arjuna wanted to abandon his duty and to live an idle life of frustration. But since the soul is always active, it is not possible to stay in such superficial position for a long time. Arjuna was a Kshatriya, a great warrior. He was trained to protect the religious principles and the people by force. How could he abruptly change his nature and become a peaceful ascetic living by begging? Thus all of his seemingly learned and lofty arguments were impossible to carry out in practice. They sounded nice for the materialistic mind, but were of no practical use, except maybe for rationalizing one's detrimental material attachments. So, let's summarize this first chapter. Having seen amidst the enemy's troops his relatives, friends, grandfathers, and gurus, Arjuna became compassionate and decided that it is better to leave the battlefield, or even to die unarmed, instead of trying to enjoy the kingdom by killing his own people for a transitory material gain. He argued that such atrocious act will destroy the human society and will lead to hellish life for everybody. Still, in spite of such convincing arguments and noble intentions, Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, rejected them as petty weakness of the heart and urged Arjuna to fight.